Hello everyone and welcome to the Smash Cut Scripts podcast and the very first episode of the series called Society Off Script. In this series, we explore how creative choices in sci-fi films can depict the sociological theory of anomie. If all of that was gobbledygook, don't worry, this episode contains all the explanations you'll need. Today's movie is Sunshine, released in 2007, written by Alex Garland and directed by Danny Boyle. You may have heard of this movie. It's well known amongst cinephiles for its controversial, but in my opinion, great switch in cinematic genre in the final third act. Anyway, if you're unfamiliar with Emile Durkheim's sociological theory of anomie from this book, it explores social conditions of normlessness and how social stability and collective conscience collapses if the usual rules and expectations of a society lose clarity. It states people function better when we have roles in which we can contribute to society, and how understanding the interdependence of each of our roles encourages unity and belonging. Without these cohesive elements, or if they weaken, we experience anomia, which is when belonging decreases and disconnection increases. If you need a practical example, think high-rise living in a city, hundreds of people within a small area, yet no one knows what's going on with others. Eventually, everyone becomes isolated because there's no social unity or collective goal. Now we'll go through the movie and discuss how anomie can be observed in it. Spoilers ahead. Obviously. We begin in 2057. The sun is dying. Therefore, life on Earth as we know it is dying. The film depicts a dystopian future where on a planetary scale, anomie is being experienced. Without the normal functions of the sun, mankind is facing extinction. Thus, the usual rules and cohesion of society have become destabilized. This anomic condition is an example of future tense trauma cinema, a subgenre of sci-fi coined by Anne Kaplan in her book Trauma Culture. This is when a film, instead of using past traumatic events and depicting how humans responded to it, it imagines possible future traumatic events and depicts how humans might respond to it. Overall, it attempts to depict societal collapse as a result of human or natural causes, rather than aliens, which ties in strongly with anomie as it can creatively imagine dystopian futures and how a natural breakdown of social order would be felt and experienced by people, as a whole and individually. Clearly, we can already see how a traumatic event of the sun dying is causing societal collapse. The crew this story follows are boarded the Icarus II spaceship heading toward the sun with a stellar bomb, with the mass of Manhattan Island, often referred to as the payload. They intend to launch this into the sun to restart it, but as we can assume from the name of the ship, the mission has already been attempted and failed for unknown reasons, with the Icarus I ship disappearing years ago. The film has underlying themes of spirituality versus logic, with the sun symbolizing the godlike object. An interview by MovieWeb with Boyle highlights this is intentional, where he states, "When you go into space, there's an element you have to confront, which is an element that's beyond our rational science." These themes serve to create additional tensions between the crew during pivotal decisions, as well as emphasize the reasons for societal breakdown. Now, I am not saying the breakdown occurs because of their differences in spirituality or logic. Rather, the differences highlight individual reactions to norms dissolving, which is the film's dramaturgical way of conveying how this is experienced. With these in mind, let's meet the crew. The Icarus II holds 8 members, which is considered a micro-society. Kappa, the physicist and protagonist, is an equal balance between logic and spiritual curiosity. We see him make decisions often with logical consideration, yet quieter moments introduce more emotion, and his final interaction with the sun seems spiritually transcendent. Searle, the psychologist, is the most fascinated with the sun and therefore the most spiritual. He finds serenity and peace by sitting in the sunlight inside the observation deck, and as he puts it, the sunlight becomes you. Kaneda, the captain, is similar to Kappa, displaying even and logical thinking, yet shows to be curious of the sun. Mace, the engineer, is the voice of reason and logic, with his defining belief that the mission is the most important objective and nothing should get in the way of that. In all scenes, when there are discussions of temporarily diverting from the mission, he passionately pulls them back into thinking about the weight of the collective goal of delivering the payload. The rest of the crew are less developed when it comes to these underlying themes, but here they are. Corazon the biologist runs the oxygen and food garden, Harvey the communications officer, Cassie the pilot, and she's the most emotionally and ethically driven member, and Trey the navigator. Within the first 20 minutes of the film, we see they are on track for delivering the payload and work well together. For our discussions of Anomie, the first segment establishes the team's collective norms, roles, and the goal of delivering the payload. We see their unified collective conscience, which, according to Durkheim, is essential to social stability and belonging. However, there are various reminders of their isolation from Earth, which is their true social norm, and also the impending stress of saving humanity. Throughout the film, the cinematography uses visual motifs to convey emotion and urgency in situations. An early moment foreshadows the downfall of the mission won't be a technological error, but a social breakdown, and uses camera work to emphasize this. Up until this point, the shots and angles have been still, conveying stability. A scene where Kaneda and Corazon are discussing the excess in oxygen reserves, Corazon notices Kaneda's anxiety of following the path of Icarus One's failure. She comforts him, reassuring, whatever it was that tripped them up, I don't think it was a lack of oxygen. This is followed by a smash cut to Mace and Kappa physically fighting. The camera work is handheld, shaking with skewed angles. These visual motifs recur, embodying the intensity of a scene and especially later in the film, the progressive social collapse. This is a strong setup of the film's creative choice to convey stability versus conflict through the lens. They're fighting because Kappa took too long filming a video to send to his family on Earth, so Mace lost the opportunity to do so himself. This minor detail shows the growing isolation from their true social norm as they reach the dead zone of communication with Earth. To deal with this conflict, Mace speaks with Searle about the confrontation, and Searle prescribes him 2 hours in the Earth room, which simulates sensory environments they'd be missing. After being in touch with his true norm, a calmer Mace apologizes to Kappa. Next, a pivotal moment. Mercury's high iron content acts as an antenna which enables Harvey to pick up a distress beacon from Icarus 1. The crew work out they could still be alive due to self-replenishing oxygen systems, solar energy, and depending on how many people survive, there could be enough food. This raises the ethical dilemma of changing trajectory to meet with Icarus 1 or continuing on their own mission. Mace reminds everyone about the importance of their mission and states, there is nothing, literally nothing more important than completing our mission. End of story. This line lays out the social stability their micro-society depends on. In view of Anomie, we see how all their decisions need to revolve around this value, creating mutual expectations that everyone's actions will show delivering the payload is their highest priority. Later, we'll see that once this core value and collective goal is jeopardized, that's where Anomia sets in motion. Everyone agrees the potential lives on board Icarus 1 are entirely expendable in light of their mission. However, Searle reminds them Icarus 1 contains a second payload. 2 bombs equals 2 chances. Thus, the question becomes, is a second payload worth the risk of altering trajectory? A vote is offered, but Searle says their micro-society is not a democracy. It's a group of astronauts and scientists, and therefore their decision is going to be the most informed one possible. Yet again, further establishing their interdependent roles and how keeping this dynamic preserves unity. Ultimately, Kappa must decide, because their physicist is the most equipped to make the decision. After some calculations, he decides that 2 last hopes are better than 1. A few minutes later, an emergency alarm alerts the whole crew to discover that Trey made a mistake in altering the trajectory. He forgot to move the heat shields, protecting the ship from the sun by 1.1 degrees. Damage is unknown due to burned sensors, so 2 people need to go outside, which falls to Kaneda and Kappa. The camera work is steady as they go outside in their spacesuits, creating a sense of control. Kaneda confirms they can fix the hydraulics panel, which is a short-lived victory when a beam of sunlight starts a fire in the oxygen room. The ship's AI, Icarus, assumes control from Cassie as pilot because the mission is in jeopardy, as the oxygen is venting. Camera work shifts to handheld, returning the visual motif and communicating urgency and loss of control. Cassie panics as Icarus threatens to assume her role, reflecting the individual reactions of having a role taken away. Cassie attempts to take control back, but Kaneda makes the following orders clear. Crew priority is to protect the payload, get the fire out, and allow Icarus to take control of the ship. With Icarus in control, Kaneda or Kappa will die because there's limited time to fix the panels whilst protected by the heat shields. He orders Kappa to go back to the airlock, sacrificing himself. Meanwhile, Mace flushes the fire with oxygen to burn itself out, and Corazon is extremely upset about it. This moment is masterfully told through creative choices that appropriately show the sociological conditions occurring. As 4 characters confront their role and purpose collapsing, the film uses a combination of shaken cameras and distorted diegetic sounds to build the emotional impact of the moment. In just a few minutes, this micro-society's captain, biologist, navigator, and pilot's roles have been weakened. Harvey, now second in command, breaks the news there is not enough oxygen to get to the delivery point. A small moment displays the immediate effect on Unity from a breakdown of roles. Corazon, Mace, and Cassie meet to speak about the oxygen reserves. The camera pans slowly toward them as they speak quietly, creating a feeling of secrecy. Corazon reveals there's enough oxygen to get some of the crew there, but 3 more people would need to die. Mace says, 3 out of 7, that's a lot of short straws. This highlights the desperate state they're in. They can no longer make informed decisions as astronauts and scientists as they once could because things are out of their control. Jumping ahead a little, Mace, Kappa, Searle, and Harvey board the Icarus 1 and discover the crew is dead, burned in the observation deck. Mace uncovers a transmission video from Pinbacker, the captain of Icarus 1. The audio and pixels are distorted, introducing us to the visual and audio motifs of this character. Whenever Pinbacker is on camera, yes, spoilers, he ain't dead, the camera is shaken and lens is blurred, coupled with sharp, distorted sounds. This creates discomfort for the audience, and the creative choice displays Pinbacker's complete disconnection from a collective conscience and social stability to the point he has spiraled into deviance. Deviance, in light of Durkheim's theory of anomie, occurs out of isolation and purposelessness, because there has been a removal of social regulations. As we've already discussed, social regulation occurs through unification of established roles, social norms, and collective goals, which encourages conformity. Ultimately, boarding Icarus 1 is all for naught, as even though their oxygen room is thriving and their payload is intact, Mace discovers the coolant system was sabotaged and the ship cannot be piloted. Coupled with this disappointing discovery, the 2 ships connected by their airlocks are torn apart manually by Pinbacker, but we don't know it's him yet. The result of this sabotage is Searle sacrificing himself so Kappa, Harvey, and Mace can make a last-ditch effort to launch themselves into the other airlock. Harvey unfortunately dies and drifts off into space. As a reminder, the remaining crew are Kappa, Mace, Cassie, Corazon, and Trey. The former 4 have a meeting to discuss the possibility of making the payload delivery point if 1 more person dies, implying someone would need to kill Trey. Kappa makes the following comment: "At least now we know what happened to the crew on Icarus 1, the same thing that's happening to us." Mace retaliates with, "What are you trying to remind us of? Our lost humanity?" I believe this moment is when both the characters and the audience realized how trapped they are. When we analyze this moment through the theory, we can see all the lead-up events, which have stripped people of the ability to do their role and achieve the collective goal, and the direction it's forcing them. They once had social stability, expectations, and ways to contribute, but without this, they're now being forced to deviate from the previous ways they achieved unity, which can be seen in their decision to kill Trey for the sake of the mission. This is called strain theory, developed by Robert Merton to build on Durkheim's Anomie. Strain theory observes how humans often turn to deviance when a collective goal is put forward, but the path/means to achieve it are inaccessible or extremely difficult. We can see how anomie and strain theory are observable in the crew, as they are still clinging to the collective goal, but the ways to achieve it have become unclear and the ability is dwindling. Therefore, they're deviating from the previously agreed upon social expectations and norms in order to achieve it. Mace offers to be the one to do it, but they discover tragically Trey has already done it. We are now up to the final segment of the film. Whilst all the crewmates are separated doing maintenance work, Icarus informs Kappa they're dying and won't make it to the delivery point, which immediately stops Kappa in his tracks. He insists Trey is dead and only 4 crew remain. Icarus insists there are 5 on board, one being unknown. Pinbacker made it on board when the airlock separated. Pinbacker's visual motifs recur as Kappa pieces the information together. The camera flashes to pictures of a silhouette standing in the sunlight of the observation room. Kappa confronts Pinbacker in the observation room, where a combination of lighting and angles are used to make sure a clear view of Pinbacker is never seen. Kappa is attacked and chased. The blurred camera, distorted sounds, and music continue and even increase to the point where every single time I have watched this, my skin has genuinely felt like it's crawling because it's so uncomfortable to the ears. Pinbacker is a man who became so out of touch with a collective conscience, he deviated from the original mission and created a new purpose for himself. He believes God has appointed him to stop humans from trying to play God by saving humanity. Once again, this ties in with the theme of spirituality, where Pinbacker treats the sun as a godlike figure, because its death is bringing about God's plan to end the human race. Escaping Pinbacker, Kappa locks himself in a room with a spacesuit. So, naturally, Pinbacker sabotages the coolant system, alerting Mace to the issue. Corazon finds signs of life in the ruins of the oxygen room, but then is immediately killed by Pinbacker. Ship systems like Icarus and lights turning off also alerts Cassie to the problem. From here, the most important things to note are that Mace and Kappa communicate with one another through comms to get the coolant system working long enough to allow Kappa to escape and make his way to the payload room, getting ready to ignite it. Mace heroically dies from diving in and out of the freezing liquid to repair the machinery. Cassie, Pinbacker, and Kappa are inside the payload as it separates from Icarus, and they hurtle toward the surface of the sun together. Cassie and Kappa barely defeat Pinbacker in a way I can't show, and Cassie too weak to continue, Kappa goes on. He sets and waits to see if the bomb works, watching thousands of sparks form above him. Intense music and shaking camera work is replaced with ethereal music and still shots of Kappa inside the bomb as it ignites. The light from the explosion fusing with the sun rushes towards him, and as it envelops him, we see a peace overcome him. A beautiful split-second moment is stretched out due to the physics and gravity meshing time and space together. He reaches toward the sunlight in an almost spiritually transcendent moment, getting to take in the victory of a successful mission. In the final shot, we see Kappa's family playing in the snow as the sunlight becomes brighter and stretches over the field. Recalling Kappa's sentiment, if one day you wake up and it's a particularly beautiful day, you'll know we made it. And that is the film Sunshine. I hope by breaking scene by scene down through the lens of Anomie, it's evident how creative choices can contain sociological conditions. We've seen the dramaturgical choices of themes and plot being weaved with cinematography to convey the emotions and psychological states of the characters. Most importantly, we've seen practically and creatively how Anomie plays out. How the collapse of social stability and collective conscience and the weakening of roles/expectations is felt by individuals and what this leads people to. If you've enjoyed this, I recommend watching the film for yourself. There was a lot I had to leave out that's worth watching for yourself. Thanks for watching and see you next time.